It turns out I'm not the only American living in Scotland. This is Nicholas Rossi, aka Nicholas Oliverdian. He was facing charges back in the USA stemming from an RAPE he committed back in 2008. So, he decided to fake his own death and flee to Scotland. Now, I'm not sure if you know this, but when you travel between countries, generally you need a thing called a passport. And if you fake your death in one country, and then travel to another country after that, that country you traveled to tends to have a record that you are in fact alive. So Interpol had been looking for this guy. But old Nicholas, he's smart. He adopted an English accent and the very believable and not at all made up sounding name, Arthur Knight. And then proceeded to do the opposite of laying low, which is frequenting local pubs wearing Hugh Hefner-style silk pajamas and smoking jackets, or wearing 1920s suits and bow ties, and would loudly state, in what I'm sure is a flawless English accent, that he was a visiting professor working at the University of Glasgow. Truly a Jason Bourne level of deep cover. And it was only penetrated when he caught COVID and had to be hospitalized, and the authorities were able to catch up with him. But Nicholas claims he is not Nicholas. He is Arthur and always has been. And when asked, well, why do you have the same tattoos as Nicholas? Someone gave me the same tattoos while I was unconscious. And why do you have the exact same fingerprints as Nicholas? Someone has meddled with my fingerprints to make them match. And I'm sure if they asked him about dental records, he would have said, the better to eat you with, my dear. But he claims to be the victim of an elaborate conspiracy to frame him, and his wife is standing by him. Oh, did I not mention he has a wife? Yeah, he got married here. I don't know what a fake college professor earns, but I'm guessing she pays the bills, and she's standing beside him because she believes him. Or she knows she's sitting on millions for the story rights to this, and it would be dumb to jump ship now, so ride that shit to the end, lady. Anyway, now he's fighting extradition by claiming to be infirmed, wheelchair bound, and in an oxygen mask. The court's not buying it, so he actually did come up with a clever way of stalling by committing a crime here in the UK that needs to be dealt with before he gets extradited. Which in this case was assaulting a guard at the jail he's being held in. Pretty impressive for a dude in a wheelchair and on oxygen. Also, I need to polish up my CV, because I hear the University of Glasgow might soon have an opening for a new fake professor. There's an update in the tale of Nicholas Rossi. You know, the American conman and rapist who faked his own death, fled to Scotland, and has been lying low using a fake English accent and the name Arthur Knight. Well, in addition to the tattoos and fingerprints matching the guy they're looking for, the police are also in possession of a notebook showing all of the alternate names he considered using before landing on the fake name Arthur Knight, and I'd like to take you through them. Charles King, Robert Hood, Benjamin Bigg, Warwick Castle. What, was Buckingham Palace taken? Richard York. You know, the guy from Bewitched. Adrian Wall. I actually like this one. I'm a little disappointed he didn't choose that. Winston Dickens. First name of Winston Churchill, last name of Charles Dickens. And Nelson Stone, who I'm pretty sure Brian Bosworth played in an action film. Anyway, F this guy. Can't wait to see him on the inside of a prison cell where I'm sure his con man antics will go down really well. There's been an update in the strange and sordid tale of Arthur Knight, aka Nicholas Rossi, aka Nicholas Oliverdian. Now, I have been obsessed with this man ever since first learning of him, and if you need a refresher, Nicholas Rossi is an American con man and serial rapist, and when it looked like he was about to get caught in the United States, faked his own death and fled to the United Kingdom. At which point he adopted an obviously fake English accent and an equally obviously fake English name, Arthur Knight. And when he contracted COVID and had to be hospitalized, Interpol was able to determine from his fingerprints and arm tattoos that it was the same guy they'd been looking for months. Arthur Knight claims it's a case of mistaken identity, an elaborate conspiracy to frame him. And the United States has been, hey, give us back our boy because we'd really love to send him to prison. And he was supposed to be extradited back in November of 2022, but he has been fighting that extradition through a series of cunning ploys. First and foremost is that he is claiming significant health problems, appearing in public in this wheelchair and with a completely fake costume oxygen mask. His defense attorneys have also failed to file the correct paperwork, resulting in further delays to his extradition hearing. He made a series of challenges based on the conditions of his confinement here, and when those fell on deaf ears, assaulted a prison guard. The consequences of which meant the courts had to deal with that crime before they could get to extradition. But as much as he is trying to delay, after 7 months, today is his day in court, and here in Edinburgh, he is finally facing his extradition hearing. Oh, but there's a catch. You see, apparently, after he left the United States, but before he arrived here in Scotland, he was down in England, where he raped a woman. And he's wanted for questioning down there in relation to that. So after the court here presumably decides to kick his ass out of Scotland, he's going to have to go to Essex before he finally goes back to the USA to face some hard time. Also, I do not care for how similar I look to Nicholas in this photo right here. I think it's time for a haircut and maybe some new frames. Anyway, check in later. I will absolutely have another update for you once his extradition hearing is over and the verdict sending his ass out of the country is confirmed. The extradition hearing of Nicholas Rossi has finally begun. Yes, Nicholas Rossi, the American con man who was wanted for multiple instances of sexual assault in the United States, who then faked his death and fled to the UK where he set up shop as Arthur Knight, is finally getting his day in court. And what a shit show it already is. First, Arthur Knight, and we will be referring to him as Arthur Knight because he claims that he is Arthur Knight and not Nicholas Rossi, showed up in court wearing these robes, which upset the judge. You see, the judge thought that Arthur was making fun of the court by wearing judge's robes. But no, old Arthur converted to Orthodox Judaism while in prison, and this is his formal religious dress. Okay, Arthur's defense attorney, Mungo Bovey, I guess that's a Scottish name, either that or Arthur insisted that his lawyer have an equally ridiculous made-up name. Good old Mungo tried to argue that the whole case needed to be thrown out because Arthur is wanted for questioning in a rape trial down in England. To which the judge ruled that, hey, we don't know if he's going to get charged in that, so we're just going to move forward with this whole extradition thing until we get information otherwise. Then Arthur tried to argue that he was never served crucial National Crime Agency documents, which I guess are like a combination of charging document and Miranda rights. But the police constable who served him the documents in the hospital said, no, I gave them to you, you refused to take them, so I put them on your bed and told you to sign them, and you refused to sign them. And then I wrote a receipt out saying that I had given them to you, and you refused to sign that. And then I wrote all of this in my log to show that gave them to you, you didn't sign it, but you were definitely served. And Arthur was like, well, I guess it's your word against mine. I don't know how the judge felt about that, but I can guess. Stay tuned for day 2. Day 2 in the Nicholas Rossi, aka Arthur Knight, extradition trial. Let's get into it. Defense attorney Mungo tried to have the hearing dismissed again, this time arguing that Knight was not brought before the sheriff in sufficient enough time, and also that he was not processed at the police station in the traditional way. Now keep in mind that Arthur Knight was caught at the hospital, where he was sick with COVID-19, and described by hospital staff as the sickest person in the entire hospital. So no, I don't expect these arguments to go over very well with the judge. Oh, and Arthur Knight showed up 4 hours late for court today because of transportation issues with the van that was taking him from the prison to the courthouse.
I'm not sure if this is because the van broke, or the van couldn't accommodate the electric wheelchair that Arthur Knight doesn't actually need, or if he simply was going, oh no, 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 this won't do at all, and refused to get in the van. And when he did finally show up at the courthouse, his defense attorney, Mungo, tried to get the courtroom sealed from the press and the public. He claimed he was trying to protect his client's privacy because they were going to discuss the sensitive topic of his many psychological issues. The judge said, yeah, no. After failing that, Mungo tried to argue that because of his client's many psychological issues, he was not going to be able to get sufficient treatment in the United States if he was extradited. And for real, hats off to Mungo for literally throwing every single thing against the wall, hoping something will stick, and to try to keep your client from getting extradited. A court psychologist who had previously interviewed Knight said that Knight appeared pleasant and engaging, but also teared up wistfully when speaking of his beloved wife, Miranda. The court shrink said, oh yeah, this guy definitely has psychological issues, but crazy? No, he's just playing crazy so that we don't send him back to the USA. Because duh. He also said that the US prison healthcare system would be just as capable of treating Knight as the UK system would. Yeah, they really want this guy off their hands and into the US prison system. Like I said, the van was 4 hours late today, so it was a short court day. More updates in day 3. Day 3 in the extradition trial of Arthur Knight, aka Nicholas Rossi. And yeah, today got even weirder and wilder. Dr. Munvile, the doctor at the prison where Knight is being housed, testified today, saying that the wheelchair is all for show. How can she say for certain? Well, CCTV footage of Knight getting out of his wheelchair, kicking a door open, and kicking a prison guard in the face. That's how. She also said that his legs were not those of a paralyzed person, and that when she examined him and ran her hands over his legs, they felt strong and athletic. Strong and athletic. I mean, maybe in an E-Honda from Street Fighter kind of way? And surprise, surprise, she also confirmed that the oxygen mask Knight frequently likes to wear is complete BS. He has normal oxygen levels without it. He doesn't need it at all. And also, most of the time he wears these things, they're like nebulizer masks. They don't do anything. They are completely for show. Knight's defense attorney, Mungo Bovey, was up next, and he presented to the court numerous instances of his client's abuse of prison staff. No, not instances of the prison staff abusing Knight. Knight abusing the prison staff. Even one instance where Knight called a prison worker an effing C. This is the guy's own defense attorney saying this stuff to the court. What he's trying to establish is that Knight has a clear personality disorder, but because of that personality disorder, he should remain in the UK for treatment and not get extradited. They tried this yesterday, so I'm guessing this is the legal strategy they're honing in on to keep Knight from getting 86 back to America. Mungo also brought in an American attorney to testify about what prison conditions might be like for Knight back in the USA. The standard of care he could expect to receive for his personality disorders, whether he would be put into solitary confinement or not, and what that might look like, etc. The idea was to make American prison sound so horrible, even inhumane, that the judge would not extradite Knight back to America. I'm not going to get into the whole U.S. carceral system in this video or the differences between UK and U.S. prisons. I don't know which country is worse to be locked up in. Honestly, it's probably academic. If you're in prison, it sucks. But specific to this guy, Arthur Knight, he's going to get the crap beaten out of him by the other inmates on the regular, regardless of what country he's locked up in. I just don't know what the funnier thought is. Him trying to do the Arthur Knight shtick in the UK, or him trying the Arthur Knight shtick in an American prison. Day 4 in the next video. Day 4 in the extradition hearing of Arthur Knight, and this has been my favorite day in court so far. I am so sick I cannot lift my arms.
That is what Arthur Knight said in court today, which is pretty funny because he's been waving his arms all week, trying to get his attorney's attention, waving to court staff, or otherwise just being ebullient with his speech. Knight refuted the prison doctor's assessment that he doesn't need a wheelchair, and while he says he is not paralyzed, his legs are badly atrophied from his ordeal. And in order to drive the point home, says that while inside prison, he pays another inmate to push him around in a wheelchair. How much does he pay him? £2.50 per week, the going rate for pushers, as they're known in the prison system. I wouldn't exactly call this proof positive, because if I could pay someone only £2.50 a week to push me around in a rickshaw or a litter, I absolutely would, even if I had legs like Usain Bolt. Also, guys in His Majesty's prisons, you're only charging £2.50 a week for this service? You guys need to unionize, fight for better wages. That's all I'm saying. The advocate for the court, which would be the equivalent of the assistant district attorney in the United States system, was pretty fed up with his bullshit by this point and said, "No one can trust a word out of your mouth, you're a serial liar, and you will say anything to stop from being extradited." Knight was very offended and upset by this. In fact, he said, "I am considering going to America just to prove that I am not Nicholas Rossi once and for all." Problem solved, right? This led the court down the rabbit hole of, dude, you need to stop saying you are not Nicholas Rossi. We have established that you are Nicholas Rossi over and over again. It is one of the fundamental facts of this case. Reminder that the court has established his identity by matching his fingerprints and his many arm tattoos. Arthur Knight claims he is the victim of an elaborate conspiracy to frame him, that someone changed his fingerprints in the police database to match those of Nicholas Rossi, and that hospital staff gave him matching tattoos to those of Nicholas Rossi while he was unconscious in the hospital with COVID. I am not Nicholas Rossi. I am Arthur Knight, an Irish orphan who moved to Scotland, which is why my English accent is less than perfect. The court rolled its eyes and said, "Okay, let's indulge you. Let's ask you some very basic questions about your orphanhood and your biological parents, like, what were their names?" "I do not have their names. They are written down on a piece of paper that is being held by an individual in Ireland who refuses to give them to me, but as soon as I am able to get them, I will provide them to you." Knight repeatedly claimed he was the victim of a grand conspiracy, and then accused the man who's trying to extradite him back to Utah prosecutor David Levitt, of ritualized child sex abuse. So I guess in addition to everything else, Arthur Knight is a member of QAnon. Fifth and final day of the hearing, up next. Day 5 in the extradition hearing of Arthur Knight, aka Nicholas Rossi. Today was weird and yucky. So today ordinarily would have just been a formality. Opposing counsel would have submitted their closing arguments, and the judge would have gone away to decide. But nothing about Arthur Knight is ordinary, so of course, today wasn't either. Defense attorney Mungo Bovey said, "We don't have any more witnesses to call." Knight exploded at his lawyer over this and said, "I do! Counsel is dismissed!" Mungo Bovey and Arthur Knight argued over this in the courtroom, but Mungo ultimately relented and allowed Knight to call on his surprise witness, a friend he made in prison. This man, 59-year-old William King, who is currently in prison for, how do I put this delicately? Kids. Stuff involving kids. Yeah, I just need to slow everything down here for a second. Arthur Knight, who is accusing the Utah prosecutor trying to extradite him back to the United States of being a child sex abuser, has one friend he made in prison who is a child sex abuser. But of course they'd be friends. They've got so much in common. They're both rapists. One guy's a knight, the other guy's a king. It's a match made in heaven. Okay, not heaven, the other place. It's a match made there. But is it any wonder that Mungo did not want his client to call on this guy to be a character witness? you're not really going to create a whole lot of sympathy with the court if this is the kind of company you're keeping. Anyway, this monster testified that the prison staff have been horrible tonight and cited an incident where Knight fell to the floor and the prison staff would not help him up. In fact, they taunted him to get up off the floor by himself because there was nothing wrong with him, a diagnosis that has been confirmed by the prison doctor. King said they picked on him from there. It was constant hounding. Every time he asked for help, they refused. Because, yeah, he's faking. The prison doctor says he's faking. Every one of us knows he's faking. I don't know how the UK prison system works, but I don't think that you are legally required to indulge a fabulist. King told Mungo that he'd never seen Knight walk. That's a sentence. And that the prison staff said they were going to take the wheelchair away and rip that oxygen mask right off of him. Again, the prison doctor says he does not need the wheelchair or the oxygen mask. It is not a hardship, nor is it abuse to take those things away from him. King claimed that Knight's condition has deteriorated and that he is withdrawn into his shell, adding that prison isn't good for him. Who is prison good for? Never mind. The judge repeatedly had to warn King that he would put an end to the testimony if he kept straying from Mungo's questions, and ultimately put an end to it outright at the 10-minute mark when King launched into a monologue challenging the prison doctor's findings that Knight is physically fine. The judge ended the Zoom call, and you would have thought that would have been the end of the circus, but there was still plenty of crazy left in the tank. So after William King, the child-abusing monster, had been dismissed from court, Mungo tried to play for time and asked the court for an extension so that they could submit more evidence in the defense of Arthur Knight. And the judge was like, nah, this charade's gone on long enough. And you would think that Knight was all out of time and all out of cards to play, but oh no. Because at that very moment, Knight started having an attack, experiencing shortness of breath, and his oxygen levels in fact did drop a few points, as would happen to you or I if we started intentionally hyperventilating. Regardless, the courtroom was cleared and Knight's oxygen levels returned to normal. Mungo once again tried to capitalize on this episode and said that Knight's condition was clearly deteriorating and that he shouldn't be sent to the United States because of it. Bovey also tried to argue that Utah had waited too long to try to extradite him. The alleged rape happened in 2008, but the rape kit wasn't tested until 2017. Mungo then tried to play the sympathy card and argued that Knight would have difficulty functioning in social and family domains, a reference to his dependence on his wife, Miranda. Knight's wife, who is just as nutty as he is and is suspected of helping him fake his own death, has been faithfully by his side this entire time. Mungo said in Knight's defense that he was married in the UK to a UK citizen, lived here with her, and was looked after by her. And to be stripped of her and sent back to America, that would be hard on both of them. Which is not an incorrect statement. But I also don't think it's enough to keep this guy from getting sent back to America to stand trial for rape. And after tugging at the court's heartstrings, Mungo then asked the judge to release Arthur Knight on bail. Hang on, the serial rapist who faked his own death and fled the country, you don't think he's a flight risk? No? And look, I'm gonna hand it to Mungo. For a court-appointed defense attorney who probably hates his client, he's doing the best job he can to try to get this guy released. The guy probably is a really good defense attorney who just happens to be saddled with a really, really horrible client this time around. Anyway, the court obviously denied the motion. This guy is not getting out on bail. And with that, court is adjourned until July 12th, where it will be reconvened and the judge will render his decision on whether Knight will be extradited to stand trial in the USA. Until then, Arthur Knight or Nicholas Rossi or Nicholas Oliverdian or whatever the hell his name is being sent back to Edinburgh prison, where he's just going to have to wait, with or without his wheelchair and oxygen mask. And I promise you, as soon as court reconvenes, I will have an update for you. I plan on following this guy all the way until he is firmly in the clink. Stay tuned. Update in the strange and ongoing saga of Nicholas Rossi, aka Arthur Knight. Some of you may remember that Arthur Knight caught the ire of the court by showing up to his extradition hearing last week wearing these judge's robes, to which his lawyer Mungo Bovey had to argue that it was not what it looked like. They were, in fact, traditional Orthodox Jewish robes, because Arthur had converted to Judaism while in prison. Now, before he was formally charged, Arthur professed to be a proud Anglo-Catholic, and in order to demonstrate this during interviews, had his living room filled with crucifixes and even a jar of holy water. But sometime after his arrest, he decided that the New Testament is BS, but the Old Testament is rock on. And that's fine. You are free to change your religion as often as you like in the UK and wear whatever religious clothing goes along with it. But some of you in the comments who are actually of the Orthodox Jewish faith pointed out that no, you can't actually do that. It takes months or even years of study, and a rabbi needs to sign off on it for you to convert. Something that clearly didn't happen here. And of course, you're right. It's fake. It's all fake. It's just another one of his scams, except this one seems to be working? So ostensibly his conversion to Judaism was so that he could argue that any negative treatment he receives in prison is not because he is a rapist con man who has physically assaulted prison staff repeatedly, but because the prison staff is anti-Semitic now. The prison doctor, Dr. Mundweil, even testified that Arthur invites these things to get you into trouble and to make himself the victim. And one prison guard walked right into this trap. Presumably, having already been fed up having to indulge Arthur's fake wheelchair, fake oxygen mask, and fake English accent, now having to indulge his fake conversion to Judaism was a stretch too far, and the prison guard used an anti-Semitic slur against Arthur. Now, I do need to stress that, fake or not, this was wrong, and the prison guard should not have done that. But Arthur reported it, the prison guard was suspended pending an investigation, and yesterday, the prison guard was formally arrested and charged with a hate crime. So not only did the prison guard screw his own career, but in this one instance, validated Arthur Knight's claims that he is a victim. Is this going to be enough to dissuade the judge from granting an extradition request? I don't know. I hope not, but stranger things have happened. We'll all find out in 3 days when court reconvenes and the judge announces his decision. Stay tuned. Breaking Arthur Knight, aka Nicholas Rossi, news. On the eve of the judge's ruling to decide if he will get sent back to the United States to stand trial for his crimes, Arthur Knight has offered to apologize and beg for forgiveness from Nicholas Rossi's victims, even though he still maintains that he is not actually Nicholas Rossi. He said all this and more in a lengthy interview with the famous British newspaper, The Times. And I'm going to quote you every last thing he said in that interview because each line is more and more bananas. The interview, by the way, was behind a paywall. So yeah, I bought a subscription just for you guys. And I swear, I do have other content beyond the Arthur Knight related stuff, but the stupid idiot keeps doing stupid, idiotic stuff. So Nicholas Rossi, who claims that he is Arthur Knight and was born in Ireland and not the USA, told The Times that he wants to express contrition for the actions of a man that he claims he's never met. Even though I am not Rossi, I want to apologize to anyone impacted by his actions. To anyone affected, I offer the greatest of sympathies from the bottom of my very, very broken heart. God, he makes my skin crawl. I just want to make people happy, make my wife Miranda happy, and leave the world better than I found it. I have no desire to make
anyone miserable. That is why I want to ask for forgiveness. I stand with the victims in their journey for justice.
So even though the court has repeatedly proven that this guy is in fact Nicholas Rossi, he continues to claim that he's never set foot in the United States. And then here's a new one, claimed to have lived in the UK back in 2005 during the London tube bombings, and says that he was actually in them. So if you need a refresher, the London tube bombings were a series of terrorist attacks that occurred on July 7, 2005, where bombs were set off simultaneously on buses and subway trains. 52 people were killed and 700 people were injured. They were quite horrific, the deadliest terrorist attacks to have occurred in the UK in 35 years. And Arthur Knight claims to have first-hand experience with it.
I was sat near the door, holding onto the rail of the tube, and I just remember staring into the black abyss as we sped through the underground tunnels. I heard what sounded like a supersonic boom and a ghastly sort of dystopian flash. It almost looked like a cartoonish fireball.
So, George Santos claimed to have been at 9/11, and this George Santos lookalike claims to have been at the 2005 London bombings. Common thread here with these con men. Knight, however, did acknowledge that his account would be met with disbelief.
Because I have been adjudicated to be Nicholas Rossi, people would say that I must be lying and exploiting it for my purposes. That is why I don't talk about it. But the horror of it is what caused my diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm scared because everything I say or do becomes potential fodder for the tabloid newspapers.
Even though the Scottish court has proven time and again that Arthur Knight and Nicholas Rossi are the same person, Arthur Knight continues to deny it. However, now he does acknowledge there are maybe a few similarities between the two guys.
I have had a very difficult life, and apparently Rossi also had a very difficult life, as I understand it.
Rossi, who spent some time in foster care, got a lot of sympathy by complaining about the poor conditions and abuse he apparently endured as a child in the United States. Knight, similarly, claims that he was also mistreated as a child, even though he grew up in Dublin. And I get it. As a screenwriter myself, I'll reuse material if I think it's good. Arthur Knight has also admitted to sharing the same first name with Nicholas Rossi.
I am also a Nicholas. I am Nicholas Knight Brown, but I legally changed my name to Arthur.
And just to add that little extra proof to support that he is not and could not be Nicholas Rossi,
he said, if I was Rossi, I would most certainly not sever my ties with those with whom I was acquainted, because I wouldn't have any support system. If I encountered Rossi, I would conduct a citizen's arrest and call the police. If Rossi is alive, then he should come forward and save my wife and me from this mess.
His story has changed somewhat, though. If you remember, the reason they were able to prove that he was Nicholas Rossi was because his fingerprints matched and he had the exact same arm tattoos when the police caught up with him. Something that before Arthur Knight claimed was an elaborate conspiracy against him. But now he contends that he is just the victim of an administrative error, and him getting labeled as one of America's most wanted men is just an unfortunate coinkydink.
People must know that mistakes can and do often happen. I think I will be remembered not as a hero or a villain, but as a bystander.
It's mighty big of him to just try to let Scotland off the hook like that with no hard feelings.
I am not going to lose this case. I refuse to be ridiculed. I refuse to be railroaded into accepting what amounts to daylight rendition. It has been said that what the U.S. wants, the U.S. gets, but I am not going to abide by that. Good luck with that, pal. The Times also asked, quite bluntly, if he'd ever raped any women, to which Arthur Knight went, I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear. I didn't understand the question. What was that again? Did you rape any women? Absolutely not. No, 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 no. But because my name has now forever been inextricably linked to these absolutely repulsive deeds, I cannot give anything but help in the healing process. I mean, screw this guy. Screw this guy so damn much. And David Levitt, the Utah County prosecutor who kicked off efforts to extradite him, said that he has got to face time in the U.S. He said, I believe that every human being can change, and I hope Rossi does, but I also believe he represents a threat to every single person he comes in contact with, particularly women. And to protect society, he needs to spend every one of his remaining days behind bars. Unfortunately, according to most criminal law experts, he's only looking at about 5 years in jail, and that's if he does get extradited back to the United States. A decision we will find out in about 15 hours or so. Stick around. I will have an update for you on that one as soon as it happens. Nicholas Rossi, aka Arthur Knight, is back in court. Yes, court has reconvened for the extradition hearing to determine if he will get sent back to the United States to stand trial for his crimes. Also, he's got a new hat! I just love how he's slowly transforming into the Penguin from Batman. Court-appointed defense attorney Mungo Bovey leaving it all on the field today, trying every last trick he knows to keep his client from being extradited. Bovey argued that even though the court has established that Nicholas Rossi and Arthur Knight are the same person, it has not been established that Nicholas Rossi is a U.S. citizen, so it would be unfair to send him back to a country that is not his own. Arthur Knight fumed at the allegation that he was Nicholas Rossi and demanded that Mungo Bovey be fired. "Counsel is dismissed! Counsel is dismissed!" he argued repeatedly. Now you might think this is crazy, and it is, but it is also an effective stalling tactic. Part of the reason why this thing has dragged out as long as it has is because Arthur Knight has kept firing his court-appointed defense attorneys. I believe Mungo Bovey is his 9th defense attorney so far, and each time he lets one go, it causes the whole process to get backed up. The judge was not having any of Arthur's antics today, though, and demanded that if Arthur could not keep his mouth shut, he would be removed from court, and the hearing would continue without him. Also, I found out they're not called judges in Scotland, they're called sheriffs. This is the sheriff presiding over the hearing, Sheriff Norman McFadden. This is his nice face, and this is his not nice face, which I presume he has been wearing the entire time Arthur has been in his court. Also, I love the Whigs' UK court system. Mwah. But that wasn't Bovey's only play. He said that it would violate Arthur's human rights to be extradited. For one, it would make it very difficult for Arthur to coordinate with his attorneys back in the UK, which is true. He also argued that the conditions of the Utah prisons, where Arthur would be held while on trial in the United States, were completely unacceptable. He argued that the Utah prisons were short-staffed, offered poor medical care for Arthur's many personality traits, and had twice the average rate of death by suicide. He also argued that if Arthur were convicted of rape in Utah, that his sentencing would be determined by an executive board and not a judicial one, something that he felt would be a violation of Arthur's human rights and unacceptable to their UK standards of justice. Finally, Bovey argued that Arthur's propensity to create conflict in the prison system, you know, all the nuttiness and antics and lies that he's done so far, which Bovey attributes to personality disorders on Arthur's part, would make life very, very difficult for him in U.S. prisons. The conflict this man displays will endanger him, Bovey said. And I gotta tell you, if there is a compelling argument as to why the UK won't extradite this guy back to the States, it is that one. I think we all know
They're gonna go hard on him if this guy lands in a U.S. prison. Neither the guards nor the other inmates are gonna take kindly to having to deal with this guy's bullshit. The advocate for the court, i.e. the UK equivalent of the district attorney's office, said nah to all of Bovey's arguments. The only question is which side was more compelling to Sheriff McFadden. And with that, court was adjourned until July 19th, where McFadden has promised he will render a verdict. So hopefully that means I can give you other non-Arthur Knight related content for the next week, but no, he's going to do something stupid in the next 7 days. But as soon as I hear something one way or another in the Arthur Knight saga, you will get an update. Stay tuned. Every time I post a video about Arthur Knight, aka Nicholas Rossi, and the ongoing insanity that is his extradition hearing, I keep getting the same questions in the comments. How is he paying for all this? Well, thanks to the investigative journalism of the Scottish press, we now have an answer, and the person paying all of Arthur's legal fees is, you. Yes, the Sunday Mail has revealed that Arthur has received £40,000 in legal aid from the Scottish government to pay his legal fees in his extradition hearing. Now, in order to receive this financial assistance from the Scottish government, he needed to demonstrate financial need, and he did so by showing that he spent over £30,000 of his own money in his defense so far. Keep in mind that in addition to being a sexual assaulter, Arthur is a con man who has defrauded or otherwise stolen upwards of $500,000 from various people in his life, and that's just the amount that we know of so far. And also the £40,000 in assistance he's gotten so far, that doesn't include the legal fees he's got coming from the last week of his extradition hearing. Now, I don't know what his lawyer, Mungo Bovey, is billing per hour, but I've also never heard of a broke criminal defense attorney, and the Scottish people are gonna be on the hook for those legal fees. And that also doesn't include the estimated £3,000 per month it costs to house this guy in jail for the last year during this trial. Now, if you're watching this video from the United States, you're thinking £40,000, that's not a lot. But if you're in the UK, trust me, it is. There are staffing shortages in the hospitals and schools here in Scotland, and when you consider that the government could hire a new NHS nurse for starting salary £27,000 a year, or a new teacher for starting salary £34,000 a year, you can understand why the Scottish people really want to get rid of this guy. This is just one of 2 Arthur Knight stories that have dropped this week while we wait for the verdict in his extradition hearing on Wednesday. The other story I'm going to do a video on tomorrow, and you're going to want to see it. It's a whopper. Nicholas Rossi, aka Arthur Knight, update. The dead speak. Sorry, I mean the dad speaks. Well, technically stepdad. It's complicated. Yes, in a wide-ranging interview with the Daily Mail, David Rossi, Arthur Knight's stepdad, gives us never-before-heard details about Arthur's early life through to now, and, trigger warning, it's pretty awful. This is David Rossi. He smokes, he lives in an apartment in Rhode Island, and he says that everything that Arthur Knight has been doing in the UK courts, he's seen it all before, and Arthur has always played the victim. He adds that Arthur is the devil's spawn, and an evil child who would physically beat his mother and grandmother. Oh, and in case you were wondering, David is 100% sure it's the same dude. In his own words, the wheelchair, the mask, it's crap. There's nothing wrong with him. Everything about him is Nicky. It's laughable. He'll do anything to hide from the law. The real Nicky was born July 11, 1987, the son of Jack Oliverdian, who David describes as a heroin-addicted psychopath who beat his wife and killed the family dog by slitting its throat in front of his children. So that's kind of crazy. Nicholas also has 2 younger siblings, Joseph, born in 1989, and Deandra, born in 1990. David said the kids never had a dad, owing to Jack's time spent in and out of mental hospitals or jail for fraud and selling cocaine. Jack and their mother Diana divorced in 1990 when Nicholas was 3. Jack died in 2021. To make ends meet, Diana waited tables at a nightclub, and in 1994 she met David, who was earning a living as an Engelbert Humperdinck impersonator. And he was really good. So good, in fact, that he actually became friends with the real Engelbert Humperdinck. Look, here's the family with the real Engelbert Humperdinck. And that's Nicholas right there in the blue shirt. I'm old, and even I have no idea who Engelbert Humperdinck is. Never heard a single song, let alone thought there would be enough demand for Humperdinck impersonators through the mid-90s to the point that you could make a living doing it. But man, nothing about the Nicholas Rossi story is normal. So Diana and David start dating, but Diana is reluctant to introduce David to her kids. She warns him that the kids are out of control, but David just thought she was embarrassed. Nope. They destroyed my house, he says, ripping things off the walls, throwing things out of the refrigerator. And my first impression of Nicky was that he had mental problems. And they got worse every day. He would urinate in his brother's bed just to get his brother in trouble, jump out of windows and run away in his underwear. The mom said, "This is why you don't get involved." But David stuck with it. He felt the kids needed a father. Nicholas and his younger brother Joseph would torment their baby sister ruthlessly. And they sent Nicky to a hospital where he got diagnosed with ADHD, PTSD, depression, hyperactivity. But Diana and the kids came as a package. So when the couple married in 1996, David formally adopted all three children and gave him the last name Rossi. And Nicholas was even ring bearer at the wedding. And of course, nothing changed after the marriage. In fact, it got worse. Nicholas would make up stories of his stepdad beating him to the mom. It was a recurring theme that would continue throughout Nicky's entire life. David said there was no doubting Nicholas's intelligence. Nicholas told him that one day he would be on the cover of Forbes magazine. But in the meantime, he was repeatedly into mental institutions and then getting kicked out because they couldn't handle his unruly behavior. Just some of the unruly behavior? Well, assaulting other children, urinating on beds, and wiping feces on the walls. And in those times when Nicky was back at home, David had to install 5 separate locks on his bedroom door to stop him from running away. And it all culminated in 1999 when the family went on a trip to Walt Disney World in Florida. The mom went in to buy some souvenirs. Nicky said, "I'm going with Mommy." Diane, the mom, said, "No, stay here. I'll be right out. There's too many people. You'll get lost." But Nicky didn't listen. David said, "You're staying here." Nicky screams, "This is why your first wife divorced you, you crumb." Nicky gets out of the van and starts hitting his own mom. David responds in kind. "I hit him so hard. I broke his nose. I broke his jaw. Was I proud of it? No, but 9 years of hell, I couldn't take no more." David was arrested for hitting Nicky, but the assault charge was dropped after they showed the court all the documents detailing Nicky's mental health. David and Diana broke up about a month later, and days before Christmas in 1999, Nicholas was discharged from a treatment program to a foster home. He couldn't stay with the stepdad, obviously, and he couldn't stay with the mom, so into foster care he went. From that point on, and throughout his teenage years, Nicky spent it in the state's foster system, getting bounced around between temporary homes. But it was also during this time that Nicky's political career began. He was a teen living in foster care, but also a rising star in Rhode Island state politics and arguing for reform of their foster care system. Nicholas claimed to be physically and sexually abused in foster care, and a lot of politicians took pity on him, taking him under their wings. And one politician, Brian Coogan, even came close to adopting him. And in 2002, Nicholas, who was now 15 years old, was supposed to give a press conference at the State House. Journalists and politicians were all there, but Nicky was a no-show, and nobody knew what happened. Nicholas claimed that Rhode Island officials wanted him gone because he was becoming a political and publicity threat. And he said that family court officials had instructed a psychiatrist to wrongfully certify that he had a conduct disorder in order to send him away.
But Coogan went digging and confronted the judge who sent him away and said, "Hey man, I wanted to adopt Nicholas because of how sorry I felt for the kid's stories of abuse and care. What gives?" And the judge said, "Actually, it was Nicholas who was doing the abusing, and that's why I shipped him out to a home in Florida." Nicholas bounced around the foster system in various U.S. states until he was 18. And in 2007, he was attending community college in Dayton, Ohio. And this is where his first sexual assault conviction occurred, and he had to register as a sex offender. He then went to Utah, where he raped his ex-girlfriend, and that is the crime they are currently trying to extradite him back to the U.S. for. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of those crimes here. I'm actually going to cover each of those crimes in depth in other videos in the future. This is just the cliff notes of what happened in between 1999 and when he reconnected later with his stepdad. So Nicky skips town in Utah for the rape and gets back to Rhode Island in 2009. Publicly, it's like he never left. He gets right back into politics, constantly in the local press, promoting bills on foster care reform in the House of Representatives. And the grift was strong. He claimed to be Harvard educated, even though he was only enrolled in an adult extension program that was open to all comers. And he had to withdraw from that class when Harvard learned of his sex offender status. But he became a mover and shaker in political circles. Look, here he even is with Mike Pence. In private, though, he fails to register as a sex offender in the state, something he was legally required to do, starts dating a woman that he met online, and when she breaks it off because he's abusive, he starts stalking her. He gets married and very quickly gets divorced for domestic assault, and in total, 4 women in Rhode Island filed complaints against him during this time, and that's just the women who came forward. But he also reconnects with his stepdad, David. And David is proud of Nicholas, at least the public front that Nicholas is putting out. He thinks he's going to be a big politician someday, and maybe he's turning his life around. And during this time, Nicholas also sues the Rhode Island foster system for alleged abuse and settles for $70,000. And he starts throwing cash around, taking limos everywhere and paying for lavish meals. He even takes his stepdad out to meet his new girlfriend because he wanted to impress her by introducing her to his famous Engelbert Humperdinck impersonating stepfather. And I'm not making that up. That is actually why he did it. But unbeknownst to David, Nicholas isn't spending the money from his lawsuit settlement. He's been committing identity theft and has been secretly draining the bank accounts of both his stepdad and mother. So Nicholas takes them out to this crazy $600 dinner, unknowingly on David's dime, and Nicholas has to leave to go to the bathroom. And the girlfriend, she turns to David and she says, "Mr. Rossi, please help me." Rossi says, "What's the matter, sweetheart?" She says, "I'm trapped in an abusive relationship and I can't get rid of him. I don't know what to do." And David says, "Well, you got to go to the police." And when Nicholas returns from the bathroom, David says the final words he will ever say to his stepson. "If you touch this girl again, I'll beat the shit out of you." At the time, David knew nothing about all of the assaults and rapes, but in hindsight, he says it always followed the same pattern. He'd come on in the beginning with them, I guess not too strong, always a nice guy, but once he was around him for a day or two, he'd pull this crap. Well, that's definitely an understated way of saying it. And that dinner is the last time David ever sees Nicholas. Nicholas marries again, divorces again, commits more fraud, more sexual assault, and then years later, as the authorities were closing in on Nicholas, he famously skips town for Europe and fakes his own death with the most bullshit obituary in history. And Nicholas Rossi's mom, Diana, she calls up David, the stepdad, and she's screaming, "Nicky's dead! Nicky's dead!" But David, he actually laughed. He knew it was fake right away. He says, "Diana, calm down. He loves being a con man too much to die. He's alive." But the mom, sadly and maybe understandably, she doesn't believe that Arthur Knight and Nicholas Rossi are the same person.
David, who has been following all of Arthur's escapades in the UK, says he's got no time for his stepson's sob stories. The way he's trying to calm people is just as he did as a kid. He's been this way his whole life. But he's gonna get extradited, and he's gonna pay for what he did to those girls. And that brings us up to now, 1 day away from Sheriff McFadden's verdict to decide if Arthur Knight will be extradited back to the United States. And I will absolutely bring you that verdict as soon as it breaks. So please like, share, follow, comment, or otherwise engage with this video so the algorithm brings it to you automatically. Stay tuned. Breaking Arthur Knight news! After months of antics in the Scottish courts and press, time has finally run out for Nicholas Rossi, because today Sheriff McFadden is announcing his ruling on whether Arthur will be extradited back to the USA to stand trial for his crimes. And the verdict is... What the fuck? Postponed? What do you mean postponed? They say why? Medical reasons? He's done it again. Another freaking stall for time. He's done that Ferris Bueller trick where you lick your palms to make him go all clammy and you say, "Mom, I don't feel so good. Do I have to go to school today?" Arthur has been making a mockery of the Scottish courts for months with these delay tactics. Firing his lawyers, submitting paperwork late, feigning illness, anything and everything to delay court proceedings. And you'd think the Scottish court system would refuse to be played by it any longer. But at the 11th hour, he's pulled another rabbit out of his hat. And the extradition hearing, it's been delayed until when? August 2nd? That's 2 weeks. And let me ask you this. In 14 days, what's to stop him from pulling this move again? It feels like a pretty big loophole in the UK court system if the judge can't rule in absentia. But don't worry, while we do have to wait 2 weeks for the ruling in the extradition, we won't have to wait 2 weeks for news, because this guy seems to do something that pops up in the papers like every 48 hours. And I know there's going to be more details about whatever the hell went on inside that jail cell to convince the court to delay, and as soon as I have them, I will spill that tea. Stay tuned. Arthur Knight, aka Nicholas Rossi news. When last we left Arthur, we were about to find out if he was going to get extradited back to the United States. But at the 11th hour, the verdict was postponed for 2 weeks because of medical reasons. Now, I thought Arthur was faking because, well, that's what he does. But it turns out I owe Arthur an apology. Because he's got COVID! Again. Now, if you've been following this case from the beginning, you'll remember that this whole thing was kicked off by COVID, when back in 2021, Arthur came down with it bad and had to get hospitalized. In fact, he was the sickest person on the ward, and that's when police caught up to him and determined that he was in fact Nicholas Rossi. Or, if you believe Arthur's version of events, that's when hospital staff secretly snuck into his room while he was in a coma and gave him matching tattoos to those of the fugitive Nicholas Rossi, all in order to frame him. Now, with the second bout of COVID, prison staff were initially skeptical. He does complain a lot. He does complain about illness a lot, and he does lie a lot. But they gave him a COVID test, and it turns out this time he was telling the truth. Now, can you fake a positive result on a COVID test? Yes. Is it likely that prison staff would have let Arthur tamper with the COVID test in order to give a false positive? No. But the timing is still suspicious. I mean, super suspicious. Like, it's obvious he gave it to himself, right? Maybe it was his wife Miranda who infected herself so she could bring it to him. Maybe he just hung around anyone in the prison that was coughing or hacking. Or maybe it is all just one giant coinkydink. But I doubt it. But regardless of how he got it, he does have it, and court has been delayed until he recovers. But a little advice for Arthur, man, if you keep catching COVID, you're going to need that oxygen mask for real. Anyway, you know there's going to be more news on this guy every single day while this drags on, and I am going to keep you covered. Stay tuned.
Nicholas Rossi news! Yes, it's August 2nd, the day we have all been waiting for, because after months of delays, antics, and general insanity, today we finally find out if Arthur Knight, aka Nicholas Rossi, aka Nicholas Oliverdian, can be extradited back to the USA. Sheriff McFadden reconvened court today, and Arthur was there. In spirit, anyway. You see, Arthur had to appear by video link from jail because he wasn't feeling well. And you know, I think these court proceedings have finally gotten to him because he was subdued, quiet, doubled over in his wheelchair, didn't answer the court when they asked him if he was Nicholas Rossi, wasn't even wearing his fake religious robes. No, he appeared wearing a baggy green sweatshirt, the kind you put on when you're feeling really blah. We've all been there, right? And Arthur's lawyer, Mungo Bovey, said, hey, court should be delayed to another day because my client's not feeling well. And Sheriff McFadden said, no, Arthur is appearing voluntarily by a video link. And Arthur didn't like that because his head popped right up and he started shouting at the judge, I have had a stroke and no one will help me. They have used force to bring me here. Norman McFadden, you are a disgrace to the legal profession. So Mungo Bovey asked Arthur to be excused and the video link was cut. Guy's a smart lawyer. And it was at this point that Sheriff McFadden finally delivered his judgment. And I'm not going to do a Scottish accent for it. Don't worry about that. I have heard evidence from 3 medical professionals, and I am satisfied that all of them were credible and reliable. In addition, evidence was adduced from the requested person, and I conclude that his evidence was unreliable. And to that extent, I would not be prepared to accept any statement of fact made by him unless it was independently supported. His claim that he could not lift his arms above his head and keep them there because of atrophy in his arms was contradicted by his behavior during the proceedings when he regularly raised and kept his hand raised during the hearing as he tried to engage the attention of the court. He contradicted himself, and of course, he continues to deny that he is Nicholas Rossi and maintains he is an Irishman, adopted at birth, long resident of the United Kingdom, and who has never set foot in the United States. He has, with medical professionals and in court, avoided questions about his childhood and upbringing. I conclude because that is a canvas on which he has not yet chosen to paint. I conclude that he is as dishonest and deceitful as he is evasive and manipulative. These unfortunate facets of his character have undoubtedly complicated and extended what is ultimately a straightforward case. And here's the big one. So I conclude that extradition would be compatible with the convention rights within the meaning of the Human Rights Act of 1998. But wait, it now follows that I must send this case of the requested person, Nicholas Rossi, to the Scottish ministers for their decision on whether he is to be extradited. So that last sentence is kind of key as to what happens next. See, Sheriff McFadden was ruling on whether Arthur could or should be extradited. And the answer is yes, he can and should. And now it gets sent to the Scottish Minister of Justice, Angela Constance, for her decision on whether or not he will be extradited. But don't worry, she's just going to rubber stamp it. So you're asking, fine, okay, when is he getting sent back to the USA? Well, you're not gonna like this. You see, Arthur is allowed to appeal this decision under Scottish law. And if just getting here is any indication, there's a lot more craziness still to come, guys. So stay here because I have got you covered and I will bring you any and every update until this guy is safely behind bars back in the USA. And I'm guessing even when that happens, he's still gonna find some ways to make some news. Stay tuned. Nicholas Rossi update! And this time, it's about his wife, Miranda. Oh, we haven't talked much about Miranda before, have we? She is definitely worth her own video series, and suffice to say, she and Arthur are peas in a pod, and she is just as big a con man as her husband is. And Miranda just made the news because her PR firm is about to get dissolved by the UK government, because just like everything else about the couple, this thing was a scam too. So back in 2022, just as it was getting out that this eccentric dude in Scotland with the fake British accent called Arthur Knight was actually the fugitive conman rapist from America, Nicholas Rossi, his wife Miranda set up the PR company Knight Corp Limited, in order to capitalize on the brewing media circus and try to make some money on the thing. And honestly, his heinous crimes aside, it was a pretty good idea. This guy is must-see TV. I'm definitely fascinated. But you see, Night Corp Limited, they never filed the right paperwork, and the government was like, hey, we need some confirmation that this is all on the up and up and everyone is who they say they are and not like some scammy con artist. And you would think that if the business was on the up and up, it would be pretty easy to rectify. You know, just send in the right paperwork, right? Except she does this all the time. Veritas Cube Limited, a PR firm, dissolved for the exact same reasons back in 2021. She actually opened this one with her brother, Kevin Knight. He was the CEO. She was technically underneath him as an employee. Except when Kevin was interviewed about it, he said that he had never heard of the company before and certainly wasn't the CEO of it. Yeah, it seems his sister had opened a company and put it in his name, all without his knowledge. And when Kevin found out about it in 2020, he told the government, get me the hell off this thing, which left Miranda the only remaining member of the company. And when the government came asking that business for some details to prove that everything was on the up and up and not some sort of shady kind of operation, she didn't. And so the government shut it down and dissolved that business. You starting to see a pattern here? Let's give you one more. Nafsika Global Holdings Limited. This business actually was halfway on the level. And the reason for that is because the person that Miranda and Arthur were scamming was listed as a company officer. Nafsika Antipas is a Canadian TV show host and vegan lifestyle advocate. And when Nafsika was looking to expand her business into Europe, she hired a freelance PR manager who could set it all up for her. Someone with a PhD from Harvard, in fact. Dr. Nicholas Arthur Timothy Knight Brown. Yeah. And in February of 2020, 3 days before he would fake his own death, with Miranda's help, Arthur and Miranda pressured Nafsika into setting up a company in the UK in her name with Arthur and Miranda listed as company officers. They then proceeded to scam her out of 30,000 American dollars, and when Nafsika asked for updates on the work that they were doing for her, they kept stalling her, and even sent her a fake photo of Miranda in a hospital bed as a reason as to why they were behind schedule. And when Nafsika got fed up with being scammed, she stopped paying, at which point Arthur tried to extort another 75 grand out of her. Arthur went on a tear creating fake websites accusing Nafsika of being a fraud and a thief unless she paid up. It actually wound up costing her about $250,000 to try to repair the PR damage that was done by him. There's a lot more to that story, and I'll cover it in a separate video, but suffice to say, that little scam LLC went bye-bye too. Man, this Arthur Knight story just keeps getting weirder and weirder. These two have an honest-to-God Joker and Harley Quinn dynamic. And the thing about people like this, the more desperate and backed into a corner they get, the crazier things are about to become. Stay tuned.
Nicholas Rossi update! So last month, the Scottish courts determined that Nicholas Rossi, aka Arthur Knight, could be extradited back to the USA to stand trial for his crimes in Utah. But now it looks like he's not going anywhere anytime soon. So back in 2017, right after he fled the US to the UK, but 3 years before he would fake his own death and move to Scotland, he was living in Essex in southern England. And do you think that rapey con man would stop criming just because he was in a new country? No, he met this British woman online, showed up at her doorstep, moved in with her, started abusing her kids, performed SA on her. And when I say SA, I actually mean R. And this went on for 5 weeks. Now, I'm going to do a separate video on this tomorrow because that whole story is effed up. But she called the cops, he fled, and he went to ground. And then 5 years later, he starts showing up on the BBC News wearing weird clothes and doing a weird accent. And the Essex police came a-knocking. And the Essex police wanted to question him right away, but they had to get in line, because he was claiming to be Arthur Knight, and the Scottish court needed to establish that he was Nicholas Rossi, and then there was the whole extradition thing and all that jazz. And if you remember that during the extradition hearing, his lawyer, Mungo Bovey, yeah, I know how much you guys like hearing me say his name. Mungo Bovey said that the extradition hearing needed to be dismissed because it was obvious that Scotland was going to send him down to England for questioning, and then it would make it very difficult for the attorneys to defend him properly, which means that they would have the extradition results overturned on appeal, and since that was all a foregone conclusion, why don't we just dismiss the thing out of whole cloth and save the taxpayer a bunch of money? And the Scottish courts were like, you make a very good point, Mungo Bovey, so why don't we completely resolve the extradition thing first, and then whatever happens with the Essex thing after that, well, we'll deal with that then. Well, then is now. And according to sources within the court system, the Scottish government is about to hand him over to the English police for questioning. And if they decide to charge him, there will be a trial. And if he is convicted, then he will serve his prison sentence in the UK, most likely. And only after he is released from prison for that UK crime will he be extradited to the USA to stand trial for his crimes there. So between these two countries, he might be spending the rest of his life in jail. Anyway, it's not official yet, but it is coming down the pipeline. And as soon as the official court order press release happens, I'll do a follow-up video to confirm everything for you guys. Nicholas Rossi update! Okay, technically it's a backdate. This is about a crime that happened in the past, but it is related to what is happening right now. So in a previous video, I said that Rossi may not be extradited anytime soon because he's wanted for questioning in a SA that he committed in Essex, England, back in 2017. And yesterday, I said I would do a whole ass video about that crime. Well, here is the whole ass video about that crime. So in 2017, Nicholas Rossi, who at this point is still running around as Nicholas Oliverdian, he's in Rhode Island. But he's committed a bunch of SAs, Rs, identity theft, fraud. He's been living on a friend's couch and writing checks in that friend's name. I mean, real shitting where you eat kind of stuff. And Nico is smart enough to know that all of this is going to catch up with him. And he's already plotted out his next moves. He's going to head to Europe. But he's going to need a place to stay, food to eat, money to spend. And he's not going to spend his own money on this stuff. No, he stole that money fair and square. No, he needs a new mark. And the quickest way of doing that? Online dating. He makes a profile on OkCupid, and this unfortunate woman right here swipes right on him. Michelle Minar. Michelle is 7 years older than Rossi. She's a single mother of two. And at the time, her daughter was 7 and her son was 10. And her son is special needs. He's autistic with global developmental delay and a speech impediment. And she and Rossi, they start DMing and then Skyping and then video chatting. And within days, he's saying he wants to move to the UK to be with her. And he's persistent and charming and persuasive. He puts her in awkward and uncomfortable positions where she feels guilty saying no, because this is what sociopaths do. They prey on that. They prey on your guilt and on your goodness. They exploit it as a weakness. And Rossi keeps pushing, and she says, well, look, it would be fun to meet, but I have kids, so, if you did come over, we could get together for lunch or something like that. And he's like, no. I need to see you. Let me stay with you. I don't want to have to get a hotel. Let me stay with you. And he keeps pushing and pushing and pushing, and finally she relents. She says, fine, just for a short visit. And boom, he's on the next plane, and he's at her doorstep, and he's got 2 huge suitcases. And before Michelle even knows what's happened, he's moved in. It's obvious he's not leaving. He's talking about getting married. He's doing calculations about how long it's going to take for him to get his permanent residency. And within 2 days of being there, he's already trying to create divisions. He dotes on the 7-year-old daughter. He calls her a bright spark, tells Michelle he thinks she's just the most amazing thing in the world. He builds the daughter up. But he also tells Michelle she needs to get rid of her son. He ignores the boy completely, pretends he doesn't exist, except for the times he's telling the mom that she needs to ship him off to an institution to get raised by the state. Says that the kid is a waste of space, that he's never going to be able to contribute to society, and that she needs to focus on her daughter. Give the daughter every chance to succeed. Rossi's just preying on every shred of insecurity, self-doubt, and guilt about the mother's situation that this woman might have. Now, the son had a thing he liked to do. He would sneak into his sister's room, take her toys, bring them back to his own room, and throw them out his window into the yard.
It was a game he liked to play, and every time he was confronted about it by his mom or sister, he would smile and confess because to him it was harmless and funny. And one day Nicholas, either to create more divisions in the household or because he's a compulsive thief and liar, or probably both, he goes into the daughter's room and he steals her purse. He takes 30 pounds out of it, her collected pocket money. And he throws the purse up on the roof outside the daughter's window, on the other side of the house from the brothers. And the daughter's like, hey, my purse is gone. And Nicholas is like, oh yeah, your brother must have done it. Remember? That's what he does. Except he doesn't do that. He only ever did her toys, and out of his own window and into the yard, not the daughter's window on the roof. And he always confessed, but this time he flatly denied it because he didn't do it. Nicholas did. And Nicholas is like, fine, whatever. I mean, I didn't do it, but I'll replace the money if it makes everybody happy, which he never does, by the way. He steals the money from the child, never gives it back. But that's not the only thing he stole. You see, old Nico tells Michelle that he spent all his money to come over to see her. Says he had to buy a first-class ticket because he's got medical problems with his back. Couldn't possibly sit in economy. And now he needs to get treatment on the NHS because he can't afford to do it back in the USA. That's why she needs to let him stay here in the UK. And he scams her for more money too. Says, well, I'm here, so obviously I need a new iPhone and an Apple Watch. And he uses her credit cards. And they'll go out. And even though he claims to be broke, he flashes her cash. Look at me, I'm the big spender. Order anything you want. Look at me, the big tipper. He takes her for £3,600 by the end of his 5-week stay with her. And every time she says no to any of his things, he gaslights her. He says he gave up everything to come here to be with her. He cries, he howls, just supremely abusive and manipulative stuff. And this extends to sex. You see, he wants it all the time. He's very pushy about this. And one morning, just a week into his stay, they wake up and she gets dressed to go downstairs to make breakfast for her kids. But Nicholas, he's sitting on the bed, a hungry look in his eyes. And she gets up to go outside, but he blocks the door. She says, look, Nicholas, I'm not in the mood today. But he won't take no for an answer. He's kissing at her neck. He's pawing at her. He grabs her wrists, and he pushes her down on the bed. And she tells herself, just let him get it over with. Just go limp. Just leave your body. And he finishes. And he rolls off of her. And he doesn't talk or look at her. She doesn't talk or look at him. And that was the last time there was any physicality between them. And after that, as you can imagine, she tried to break it off, tried to get him to leave. But every time she did, he would say that he loved her and bust out the pretend waterworks. And Michelle is like, I'm a victim and a prisoner in my own house. Who is this man? And she does a Google search, and she finds him on a registered sex offender website in Utah. And he's shocked that she's found it. And he says it was a frame job that he had gotten with a girl who had a boyfriend. And the boyfriend found out about it. And so she had to lie and say that she was assaulted so the boyfriend wouldn't think that she cheated on him. And you can imagine how Michelle would be skeptical of all this after what happened between he and her. And Michelle, she finally goes to the police. And the police say, look, you got to change the locks when he leaves the house. Then take all of his stuff, put it into suitcases, call us. We'll take the suitcases, and then you tell him to collect the bags from the police station. And she does that. And then Nicholas starts texting her relentlessly. How could you throw me out? I've got nowhere to go. I haven't eaten or slept in 3 days. I would never, in my wildest dreams, tell someone to move here and then F them over like that. You are certifiably insane. And then he threatens to sue her. But eventually he goes quiet. But she still lived in fear for months and months and months that he was going to turn up again out of the blue. But fortunately for her, he never does. And she never sees him again until he turns up on the evening news claiming to be Arthur Knight and facing extradition back to the USA. And she learns about all of his crimes and the numerous women that he's R'd or SA'd before her. And she goes back to the Essex police and she lodges her own criminal charge against him. And that is where we are now.
Man, I told you this story was messed up, and I have no idea where it's going to go. Because of course he did it, but can they prove it in a court of law? Are they even going to bring charges against him in the first place? I don't know.
Nicholas Rossi update! Yeah, I know you've been waiting to hear me say those words for a while. Well, it's official. The Scottish Minister of Justice, Angela Constance, has signed the extradition order to kick Rossi, aka Arthur Knight, out of the country. It was 2 months ago that Sheriff McFadden ruled that Rossi could be extradited, but it took this long for the government to cross every T and dot every I on the paperwork. Now, the order actually came down last week, and we only found out about it today because of a Freedom of Information Act request, or at least the UK equivalent of one. The government confirms that it was signed on September 28th, and they have said they will not be commenting further. Rossi is allowed 2 weeks to file an appeal, and I'm sure he will, but unless something crazy happens, I can't see it going anywhere. No word yet on if Mungo Bovey will be filing that paperwork for him or not. Now, this is breaking news, so we still don't know if Rossi is going to be sent down to Essex first for questioning in the 2021 SA he's accused of, or if the Essex police are just going to drop that case so that Rossi can be shipped off on the next flight to Utah. Also, no news yet on if his wife Miranda will be going to the US with him or not. As always, as soon as I get more information, I will keep you guys updated. Stay tuned. Nicholas Rossi update! Well, looks like he's not going back to America just yet. Nicholas Rossi, aka Arthur Knight, has now been arrested in England for the essay he committed in 2017. And the law here is that all his criminal matters in the UK need to be dealt with first before he can be extradited to the United States. But I do need to point out that getting arrested in the UK means something slightly different than it does in the US. In the UK, arresting someone can just be the police bringing you in for questioning. There's no guarantee he's actually going to be charged for the essay in England. But I can't imagine the English prosecutors would jump through these hoops for a prisoner transfer unless they were planning on going the whole 9 yards. Or 9 meters, anyway. No word yet on if his wife Miranda is heading down south with him too, because this is a breaking story. It literally just got announced like a few minutes ago, so as soon as more details happen, I will keep you posted. Stay tuned. P.S. Mungo Bovey! Nicholas Rossi update! So last week, the Scottish government formally signed the paperwork to extradite Rossi back to the USA. But the English government stepped in and said, hey, we want this guy for questioning in an essay he's accused of down here. So on Wednesday, Edinburgh Prison sent Rossi down to Essex, England for questioning by the British police, and yesterday, the English police let him out on bail. Now, before you freak out, he is not out and about and walking free. Nobody is that stupid. There are 2 different types of bail in the UK. There is court bail and police bail. Court bail is when you have been formally charged and are awaiting trial, and they let you out until the start of trial. Police bail is when they still want to question you, but you haven't been charged yet. And since they can't hold you indefinitely, they gotta let you out. But because there's a standing extradition order and Rossi is a known flight risk, he has to be held in jail. But the extradition order is between Scotland and the United States. England's got nothing to do with it. So the Essex police have sent him back up to Scotland, and now he's sitting in a jail cell in Edinburgh again until the next time the English police want to question him, which is January 3rd, 2024. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that Scotland is going to have to sit on this guy for the full 3 months. England could decide to formally charge Rossi sooner than that, in which case Rossi would be sent from Scotland back down to England, where he would be sitting in a jail cell in England, and the extradition would become an England and America matter. Or England could decide to just not charge him at all. However, in that case, England probably would wait the full 3 months, just in case. There's also the third possibility that Rossi could try to commit another crime while inside a Scotland prison, like assaulting a guard or trying to escape. That would further delay his extradition to the United States. And if he does commit another crime up here, well, that means we may not have seen the last of Mungo Bovey. And until this gets resolved, the Scottish taxpayers are on the hook for paying for Rossi's accommodations. Now, the average cost of housing a prisoner in the UK is about £50,000 a year, or 140 quid per day. Starting salary for a nurse in Edinburgh is about £100 a day. So leave a comment and let me know if you think this is good value for money. And as always, as soon as more news breaks, I will post an update right here. Stay tuned. Nicholas Rossi update! As last we left him, Rossi was down in England for questioning, but was sent back to Scotland until Essex police want to talk to him again on January 3rd, which of course is what's keeping him from being extradited to the USA. But I guess that wasn't a long enough delay for Rossi, because he just filed an appeal with the High Court against his extradition. Now, filing an appeal is his legal right. He had 14 days to file it after his extradition was approved by the Scottish Secretary of Justice, and he waited until the very last minute to do it. Maybe it took him that long to file the paperwork, but probably he's playing for every last second of time, and filing it at the buzzer is how he stretches the process out. Now, an appeal isn't automatic. It's not like you get a do-over or another spin of the wheel. The court will examine why Rossi is asking not to be extradited, and if and how Sheriff McFadyen got the original ruling wrong. As a refresher, here's why Rossi and his attorney Mungo Bovey originally argued that he should not be extradited. He's not Nicholas Rossi, he's Arthur Knight. The court didn't serve him the proper paperwork in time. He's not physically well enough. It would make it difficult to confer with his lawyers here in the UK. His wife is here in the UK. Jail in the USA is inhumane. He has personality disorders that the US prison medical system won't be able to treat. And he has personality disorders that will see his ass beat by the other inmates. And reminder that all of the experts during the extradition trial said those excuses weren't disqualifiers or were just outright lies. The court now has 28 days to respond, and if they say, sorry, appeal denied, then Rossi can still bring it to the Supreme Court. But unless this case can show how the British Constitution is being let down and that the law needs to be clarified and reinterpreted for everyone living in the UK, the Supreme Court will not take it up. So more than likely nothing is going to come of this, but you never know. Everything about this case is crazy, so stay tuned. Nicholas Rossi update! Man, it does feel like a while since I've said those words. As we speak, Nicholas Rossi, aka Nicholas Oliverdian, aka Arthur Knight, is in front of the Scottish Court of Appeals here in Edinburgh in a last-ditch effort to argue that the Scottish government was wrong to sign off on his extradition back to the USA, and he is defending himself in court. No Mungo Bovey in sight. As last we left the notorious conman and essayer, Rossi was being questioned by the Essex police for an essay he committed in England in 2020, and was waiting in a jail cell in Edinburgh until January 3rd, which is the deadline for the Essex police to either charge him with a crime, in which case he would be transferred to England, pending a trial down there, or to release him, in which case Scotland would slap him on the next British Airways flight back to the USA to stand trial for his SA crimes over there. And while it is unlikely he will successfully appeal the extradition with the Scottish court, it's not impossible. And if the Essex police decline to charge him and bring him to trial, there is a very narrow window wherein he could slip through the legal cracks and not face any justice. But I don't think we're going to have to wait longer than 4 weeks to get our answer. Stay tuned. Nicholas Rossi update! Christmas came early because we've got a whole lot of details of all the crazy shit Arthur Knight, aka Nicholas Rossi, said before the Scottish High Court of Appeals. It didn't get off to a good start when Rossi, now speaking in a fake Irish accent instead of a fake English accent, and with his wife Miranda at his side to assist with his paperwork, objected that the court called him Nicholas Rossi instead of Arthur Knight, once again repeating the claim that this is a case of mistaken identity and the real Nicholas Rossi is out there walking free somewhere. This drew a sharp rebuke from one of the three judges, Lady Dorian, who said, "Your identity has been judicially determined. That is the name you will be referred to by this court. That is the end of the matter, which is judge speak for sit down and shut up, Nicky. Over the next 3 rambling hours, Rossi, who was representing himself, moved for a number of preliminary motions, like calling for an extension of his appeal to present more evidence, asking to be released from jail on bail, presumably so he could fake his death and flee to another country again, asking for Utah prosecutor David Leavitt to be called as a witness via Zoom, and to have the court impose restrictions on the media covering his case. Hey! The 3 High Court judges, Lady Dorian, Lord Malcolm, and Lord Armstrong, rejected each of these motions, telling him bluntly it wasn't their place to grant any of that, and the only thing they were here for was if the lower court had gotten something wrong in ruling that he could be extradited, and that Rossi needed to stick to the substantive issues. To that end, Rossi said he was appealing because he was ill-served by his previous lawyers, and that there was an extreme shortage of those specializing in extradition law, and that's why he lost his case. To which I say, how dare he besmirch the good name of Mungo B's fine Scottish barristry. Side note, Mungo Bovey's middle name is Fabius. Mungo Fabius Bovey. I'm pretty sure that's a Harry Potter spell. Rossi once again questioned the court why he couldn't submit new evidence, which earned him another rebuke from Lady Dorian. This court has made its decision. I am not going to repeat again that you are not allowed to lead new evidence in this case. In his next lengthy and nonsensical monologue, Rossi suggested prison staff had denied him a medical examination, which would have proved he couldn't be extradited. Lady Dorian repeatedly interrupted him to remind Rossi that he had today in court only and wouldn't get another chance to argue his case. It is not apparent this has got any bearing on the decision. It is in your interest to focus on your submission of grounds of appeal. Rossi went on to accuse the Crown Office here in the UK of acting illicitly and unlawfully and in a corrupt manner by alleging they coached witnesses and medical experts in earlier court hearings on what to say in order to dismiss his claimed disabilities, which is not true and also irrelevant. He then said the media circus covering his story had contributed to prejudice against him, and also went on lengthy rants about various newspapers, the BBC, podcasters, YouTubers, and... Oh, come on! Rossi then made a bunch of claims about the parties seeking to extradite him to the US, arguing he would not receive a fair trial as he was investigating them, so they were seeking to discredit him, and went on an incomprehensible tangent, accusing the prosecutor in Utah of trafficking children in cahoots with the Cheyenne tribe, government of Ukraine, and the highest levels of the Mormon Church, who were all engaged in an elaborate conspiracy to persecute Rossi for bringing attention to it. Rossi told the court to just Google David Leavitt, buffalo meat, and Ukraine. It's all there. Lady Dorian grew frustrated and said, I don't know how you think you're assisting yourself with these submissions. I cannot force you to make relevant submissions. I can only urge you to do so, before warning Rossi could be held in contempt if he kept it up. Finally wrapping up, Rossi praised the 3 judges for their time, saying he was truly grateful from the bottom of his heart and thanking them for the opportunity to let justice be done. A source in the court said the proceedings were like a car crash. I'm not sure anyone has put forward a worse case in the history of the Scottish court system. It was so shambolic that you have to wonder if it was deliberate or if he's just the world's worst lawyer. Lady Dorian and her colleagues will issue a written judgment in due course. Stay tuned. Nicholas Rossi update! The appeals court works fast in Scotland because Lady Dorian, Lord Armstrong, and Lord Malcolm have already come back with a decision on Rossi's extradition, which they published today, and surprise, surprise, it's appeal denied. Their written decision said that much of the material Rossi included in his note of appeal had absolutely no relevance to it, and that the only vaguely recognizable ground he submitted was that of defective representation, which the appeal court rejected because we all know that Mungo Fabius Bovi is a damned good lawyer. And if you saw my in-depth series on Rossi's extradition trial, you'll know that Bovi gave literally every defense possible, and they were all rejected, but not for lack of trying. Lady Dorian said, "We agree with the sheriff that the appellant's case is, at its core, a straightforward one. The evidence supporting that the appellant is Nicholas Rossi was overwhelming. He did not, nor does he now, produce anything which would suggest to the contrary. The conspiracy theories which he tendered in explanation were properly rejected. The appellant made wide-ranging and unsubstantiated allegations against various parties that have been involved in the proceedings related to his extradition. He alleges that he was abused, bullied, and harassed by his previous representatives, that the Crown are corrupt and colluded with his previous representatives and the United States authorities, and that he is the victim of a conspiracy at the hands of Utah County Attorney David Levitt. He has produced no evidence to support these claims, which can only be described as spurious and a continuation of the types of scandalous claims which he made throughout the extradition proceedings before the sheriff himself. The sheriff carefully considered the submissions made on the appellant's behalf as to the potential barriers to his extradition. Having heard evidence from various medical witnesses, there was quite simply nothing to support that he was suffering from any mental health condition, far less one which would render it unjust or oppressive to extradite him. Moreover, there was little, if any, evidence to suggest that, on the hypothesis the appellant does indeed have such a condition, that treatment would be unavailable in Utah. Lady Dorian added that there was nothing placed before the court which demonstrated that the proceedings in the U.S. would be unfair or that they would violate Rossi's rights if extradited. The court concludes that there is no merit in any of the appellant's arguments. It follows that leave to appeal under Section 103 of the 2003 Act must be refused. So here's what happens next. Rossi can appeal to the UK Supreme Court, but they are extremely unlikely to take up the case. The Essex police do have permission to keep Rossi in the UK until January 3rd as they try to determine whether or not to charge him in the 2020 SA he's accused of in England. If they do charge him, he'll be transferred to England, be put on trial, and either be acquitted, in which case he'll get sent to the US, or be convicted and serve a jail sentence in the UK and then get sent to the US to face trial over there. But assuming that the Supreme Court declines to hear the case and that the British police don't charge him, he's going to be thrown on a BA flight to Utah sometime in the new year. And I promise you, when he does go on trial for his crimes in the US, I will bring you every detail as I always have. Stay tuned.
Nicholas Rossi update! With only 1 week left before England has to either charge Rossi with a crime or let Scotland deport him back to the USA, we now know how much Rossi's courtroom antics have cost the Scottish taxpayer, and it's nearly £90,000. That is how much Nicholas Rossi was given in legal aid over the last 2 years. And that was just the money paid to his lawyers, shout out to Mungo Bovi, and doesn't include the cost of housing him in Edinburgh jail, court costs, and all the other expenses the state has incurred as Rossi worked the legal system to try to stay in Scotland. And last night, Scottish Member of Parliament Russell Findlay, who serves as the Shadow Justice Secretary, lashed out that this attention-seeking sex offender has made a mockery of Scotland's justice system while wasting valuable court time. This is a waste of public money. And while I believe everyone is entitled to due process, these are the tax bans in Scotland, so I can understand that some people here are scratchy that some of their money went towards this guy trying to escape justice. More Rossi news coming really soon. Stay tuned. Nicholas Rossi update! Well, it finally happened right now. Nicholas Rossi, aka Arthur Knight, aka Nicholas Oliverdian, is in an airplane at 35,000 feet
flying back to the USA to face charges stemming from his 2008 RAPE allegations in Utah. Police Scotland confirmed that the 36-year-old con man, fabulist, and sexual assaulter was shoved out of Edinburgh Airport today on a private plane. Now, whether that means commercial aviation as opposed to a government aircraft or a full-on private Gulfstream jet befitting someone of Rossi's self-importance, we're uncertain. And if you're wondering if this extradition by plane back to Utah means that the Essex police in England are no longer pursuing Rossi for an alleged 2020 essay he committed down there, no it doesn't. In fact, he has just been re-bailed in England for another 3 months while that investigation continues to be ongoing. So yeah, it is very possible that this is not the last we've seen of Nicholas Rossi in the UK. This is breaking news. It literally just happened like 3 minutes ago, so there are a lot of details we don't know yet. But as they develop over the course of the day, I'm gonna bring them to you. And of course, I'm gonna continue following this story until Rossi is safely behind bars in the UK, in the USA, or whatever the hell else other countries he's committed crimes in. Stay tuned. Nicholas Rossi update! Kicking and screaming and with his pants around his ankles, that is how Arthur Knight spent his last moments in Scotland. Apparently Rossi was completely caught off guard when US Marshals and agents from the Department of Justice arrived at Edinburgh Prison to whisk Rossi back to the USA. I mean, he shouldn't have been caught off guard. This has been 2 years in the making ever since he was first arrested in that Glasgow hospital, but either way, he didn't take well to it, roaring and crying as he was dragged away. Rossi's wife Miranda tried to file some sort of 11th hour Hail Mary injunction to stop the extradition, but there ain't a sympathetic court in the British Isles no more, so Rossi was taken to Edinburgh Airport to an awaiting US government private plane. Because America likes to roll out the red carpet for our celebrity fugitive homecomings. But Rossi didn't want to board, so he began fighting and wrestling with the US Marshals to the point where his pants fell off. And because there is not a single square inch of a modern airport that is not covered with security cameras, I know there is video of this, so please, someone at Edinburgh Airport Security, I'm begging you, my DMs are open. But on the upside, looks like he doesn't need that wheelchair anymore, right? Legs work just fine now, it's a miracle! Who says the American healthcare system is bad? We cured that guy in like 30 seconds. But kicking and screaming with his trousers around his ankles and cold Caledonian rain falling on his naked bottom, the airplane doors closed on him, and Rossi took his last breath of Scottish air. Rossi's exact whereabouts are currently unknown. We do know he is in the USA in the custody of US Marshals as they finish the extradition process before taking him to Utah and handing him off to Utah authorities. Utah prosecutors confirmed this when they said, "We're awaiting receipt of Mr. Rossi. It hasn't happened yet. It will take a few days, but when we do, we'll be sure to keep him here." We can only hope. More updates to come. Stay tuned.